The 4 steps, I broke it down very simply for you, is the why, the research, the relationship, and then the write up. If you see there's 4 steps, the only part you actually have to become an expert writer is the write up portion of it, is making sure your grammar's correct and all. And I pay for Grammarly so that I don't have to worry about that issue. Um, but if you don't focus on the very first step, the why, these other pieces are not going to fall into place. It's not gonna. It's going to take you so much more time to do either any of those things, and you won't be as successful. So the why is. There we go. There is basically who you are as an organization. In 5 years, what does your organization want to accomplish? What is there a need in your community that you need to solve? What's the problem in your community? Be very specific with who your population is. Women under 35 who have a child or are pregnant, or whatever the specific population is, not the general public, because there's no way you're going to be able to reach the general public. So who is your audience? Who are you trying to impact to make this change? What are you going to do? I've seen organizations that just want to work with foster kids. Well, what do you want to do with foster kids? Do you want to teach them leadership skills? Do you want to teach them resilience? Do you want to teach them, just give them stuff because they need, suitcases to as they age out of foster care? You really need to define what you are going to be doing with the population that you're going to be working with, and the timeline that it takes to do so. And then you do need to think, and I know it's hard with a small or starting up nonprofit, the sustainability of what you are doing, and how it's going to be able to continue to be impactful as you go forward. And I would say, looking at best practice, you could look at a different community in another state and say they're doing something very similar and they've been doing it for 20 years, and they've found support and they've found people who need to do it, and we want to duplicate that type of program here in our community. Is a way to show sustainability, even though you're not been around for very long. And the last one is the outcomes. I guess I should put evaluation there too, and evaluation. So how do you know what you did really did something, really made an impact on the community that you're, the population you're focusing on? The outcomes is great, but without an evaluation tool, whether it's simply a pre and post survey of your clients, and it can be a very subjective pre and post survey. Did you know about the resources available to you before, and do you know about them now and comfortable, reaching out and getting those resources for you, made available for you? Um, it's very scary for most people to think about evaluation. And so there are people out there that are experts at it, but most of the foundations and corporations out there, if you want to just show them that you're doing a little bit of evaluation, or that you're wanting to learn more about evaluation, they're even willing to, there's, at least in my community, there are actually foundations that are willing to invest in that portion of your program. Say you don't even know how to evaluate the success of your program, they'll pay for an evaluator to do some evaluation of the success of your program. And so you have to think about writing that into your program as well, if you don't know how to evaluate the success of your program. Um, is there any questions on this? I know it's a lot to dive into, and I know I talk very fast. So I usually stop this is an hour-long presentation that obviously I won't be doing, but usually I stop and ask people to take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and write down or use your voice memo on your iPhone and answer those 5 questions in as quick as possible as you can. Then transcribe it because you want it all written out. Then condense it into just a few sentences. And that'll help you with the next step of the process. Jessica, do you have folks talking about research and that type of thing when it comes to grants?
No, I don't have anyone coming on.
Okay. So I'll throw a little bit your way. The whole reason why the why and being very clear about who you are going to help, it really helps you with your research to find funders. If you put in women in a search engine, you're going to get every type of funder that funds every type of women. But if you're talking about LGBTQ women and you type that in there, you're going to get a whole different list of funders, and they're more likely to fund you than just the general idea of funding women's program. And they're more likely to fund you because you fit their criteria. The other key I really like is we talked about best practices, looking at what's done in other communities that's very similar to what your programming is doing a reverse search is what I call it. And I find out what funders are funding organizations that are like mine. I love doing this, honestly. I actually can find it on either their 990 or sometimes they list it on their website or in their annual report who's funding them. And then you go and see if those organizations, those foundations and corporations would possibly be willing to fund you as well. And it's maybe a sneaky way to do it, but I really enjoy doing it because it's pretty darn successful way to research. Other than that, if you are not willing to take a long, deep look at yourself as an organization, in the why, the other areas don't work out quite as well.
Jacquelyn, can I ask just a clarifying question?
Sure.
So you said the foundation, your first bullet, Foundation Center and Grant Station, were brand new. Can you explain what those are and how do you use those tools?
Sure. So in Arizona, we actually have a alliance of Arizona nonprofits, and with your membership subscription, you get a subscription to Grant Station. Grant Station is a database of grants, and you can specify what area, what state, whether you want just open grants or grants that are ready to be asked for right now, like timeline wise. Foundation Center is
Grant specific to Arizona or to any?
No.
Okay.
It's just that we get, I use it a lot because of my membership to the Alliance, which gives me a free membership to the Grant Station. It's a paid subscription. Trying to think if there's really anything out there that's not a paid subscription. I'm trying to think if there is, because I pay for all of it, except for the idea of what I talked about, the reverse search. You don't have to pay to go and find organizations that fund you. You go to GuideStar, that last bit down there, and that is free. I don't know if you guys are familiar with GuideStar. So you go to GuideStar, and it's actually a list of all charitable organizations, whether it be a organization that does programming or a foundation, actually. And you can search for their name. And then if you create a login and it's free, you can see their 990s. And on page, I'm trying to think, it's probably about page 15, everybody's 990 is a different, a little bit different, but about page 15, I think, is the list of their key supporters. And so you could actually see who they are funding, or who are funding them, to kind of do the reverse search as well. I've never used it as a tool to find grants, but if all else fails, you possibly could use it for that way, because you could find foundations in the state of Florida. I don't know where you guys are at, and go from there. But it's not going to be as successful as a paid subscription. The other reason why I listed Foundation Center is they actually have a resource. It's an online resource, but our library system in my community actually pays for the subscription. And back when you used to go to the library, you could actually go to the downtown library here in Phoenix and search the Foundation Center database and use a flash drive and save your search, and then go home and do your actually in-depth research on the organizations that you're interested in. And so it's like a $600 a year subscription, and the library is paying for it. So your community might have those types of resources. I'm not exactly sure. So this has been 15 minutes. So if you have more questions, we can go ahead and talk about those. I was going to see if there's more time later, or another time that Jessica wants to bring me on, we can talk about the other steps. But as you can see, honestly, if you do number one, number two will fall in place. Number three is the relationship. That'll fall in place because you'll be able to talk about your organization really well to a potential program person of those foundations. If you call up a program person and you stumble with what your organization does, that doesn't bode very much confidence in the program officer of what your organization is doing for the community. And then the write-up, honestly, if you typed out everything in the why, boom, you basically have your typical grant and all the questions that they ask. I do that for each one of my clients. We take 3 or 4 programs and we write all this up. And so when I need to do an application, I can write a draft in like 30 minutes and send it over to my client to proof. And sometimes there's some random things. One I'm writing right now is asking for a bio for the person who's in charge of the program. I don't have his bio, so I'm going to need that. But the rest of it I have for the organization. And so it's quite nice to get it all in one place, get it done, and then have it in your back pocket for later.
Have you ever hired or had an HR intern?
HR intern.
To do grant writing?
Well, if there are foundations out there that are willing to invest in capacity building, and an HR intern would definitely be helping with the capacity of the organization. And so you didn't need to find a funder that would be willing to do so. But I would think that there is definitely some out in your community. I know we do have some in here in Arizona that do that type of work because they want to see the organization grow stronger, and they can't do that unless they have some of the expertise like an HR person. My first fundraising job was actually grant funded because a foundation knew that they needed somebody skilled in fundraising in the fundraising role to help that arts organization grow. And then we went back to them because we grew so well that it was 18 years ago that we needed actually internet, a network. Back then we had stationary computers that didn't connect to each other, and so we needed more money just so we can do that. And so they gave us another $150,000 to do that within the organization. So there is funders for everything out there. You just have to dig.
So once you get one grant, is it easier to, I guess, renew it every time since they know you already, or is it hit and miss?
It's very hit and miss, honestly. Even with some of the best organizations, one of the utilities here in our town, they just changed over the head of the foundation, and he doesn't want to do sponsorships anymore. He wants to do program support. And so I've written the same grant for them for years, and always been funded at the $5,000 to $10,000 level, to sponsor my gala or whatever it may be. And because of a new person in town, I've got to rewrite how I talk about the organization. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier, but it is definitely easier having that relationship with them for sure. But to me, corporations and foundations are not a guaranteed thing. And so I always revert back to, what are you doing with individual giving, and securing individual long-term donors, because they're not gonna, if the economy tanks, they're not gonna go away. They may decrease their amount a little bit, but they're not gonna just up and quit giving. And I've seen corporations do that because they didn't have extra profits to give away.
Okay. Does it?
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. At the end of the process, say you're denied the grant. What is your, how can you go back to them and say, why did we get denied? I know they give a standard, we typically get standard answers.
Always.
That there's so much need out there, and there's, we've used all our money up. Is there a way to go back to them and really say, was it something that we didn't do properly in the grant, or, are they open to doing that?
It really depends on the funder. And some of them, I had one that I hadn't written for the organization, and the organization was denied 5 years previous, and they hadn't written since. And so I went back to the program officer, but she'd been there 8 years. And so she was able to go back in her notes and find out why they didn't get funded 5 years ago, and gave me a full paragraph on it. So yeah, some of them will say that, and others will just say it's competitive, and that's it. I always, even if they just say it's competitive, I write back acknowledging their decline letter, as a common courtesy. So they know that I got the decline letter, and asking for feedback on how to improve my application and chances of getting it next year, and can I apply next year, and how soon. There's one foundation here in town. It's a semiconductor, so computer systems. They're fine with you applying every 6 months for a new program. So say I got denied in March. I think it's March and September is their application deadlines. In March, I get denied for the adult program, while I could apply in September for the kids program. And they were perfectly fine with it, and gave me $10,000 actually just this last year for that, specifically that reason.
Okay, cool.
Because they told me, I asked them, when can I apply again? And they said for a new program in the next cycle.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the ratio of, I applied to five grants and I got one? What do you see the ratio being?
Well, I would say for newer organizations, new to the grant world, new to the community, as in, they're not really well known. That's pretty darn good, getting 20% of your grants. But the industry standard is at getting about 30 to 35% of your grants funded. And I always write for, I know what I need for a program, and I always write for about 3 times that in grants, knowing that my success rate's only going to be 30%. If that makes sense. So say I need $100,000 for this new program, I'm going to write to several different organizations, funders, for a total of $300,000, because I know I'm only ever at the most going to get 100,000. And there have been cases that I've actually gotten more than the 100,000. Well, then I go back to the funder and talk to them and tell them how successful the program is and how so many people jumped on the bandwagon. But can I use your funding for a different program? And I've never had them turn me down or want the money back. They're willing to make adjustments as long as you communicate with them.
Okay, we're getting close to 11:30. I know everyone's busy, so any final questions before we close this up? Okay, can you share your one big takeaway from Jacque today?
I love the reverse, what did you call it? The reverse
Search.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, I do it with my website building and everything all the time, where I go look at your competitors.
Mhm.
So I was like, oh, that completely makes sense using it on Grant.
Yeah.
I really like the feedback when it goes to when you're denied, questions that you can ask about it being, proving, and especially how soon you can apply again and how often. That was really helpful.
I'm going to check with my library to see if they are memberships of any of these grant hubs or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
And use that.
I think Nancy Miller might have some answers for us, Tanya.
But you can also, and I'm not plugging myself, but if you could also contact great professionals like myself that are consultants, and I have a one-time package just to do research, because I know that that's something that people, your board members are going to say, oh, there's no funding out there for us. Well, if you pay a consultant a one-time fee to do a research, and I give you 20 to 30 different opportunities out there that fit you, then you can maybe ask a board member to give you some more money to write the grants.
And that goes into, if you need to get the ball rolling and you just don't have time to do the research and you need to hire someone like Jacquelyn, tap into your donors and say, I have this specific ask. Can you fund this for me so we can get grant money to fund our programs?
Mhm.
And someone will come forward and help you out.
Absolutely. I mean, even a funder, I had a funder, one of my clients had a program that they knew the government would fund once it was up and running, but I needed seed money just to get it started. And so I asked a couple of my utility companies that here in town to give me each $5,000 to get the program started. And then now it's completely sustained by federal funding. But it just needed that seed money to start.
And Jacquelyn, how do we find, people in our area that do what you do? I mean, maybe that's not relevant. You don't have to have somebody who lives in your state necessarily, but how do we find those people? How do we find other consultants?
Well, I know in Arizona we have the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits, and they have a who do you know section, and it's all consultants that are out there for you. I don't know if you guys have that in your community, but Jessica can also ask, or she can look at the there's a list of consultants all over the nation that we put together, and you can see what is in your community as well.
Hey, it is 11:30. Thank you so much, Jacque.
No problem.
We learned a lot from you. I will be posting this video somewhere. I'm not sure where yet. And I will, Jacque, can we get like the first 2 slides about research and the why
Sure.
to share?
To you. Sure.
And that's it for today. Thank you
Perfect.
everyone for joining.
Thank you.